Play. All right, it appears to be working very good. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so in case you are behind in the reading assignments, which maybe some of you are, Riley just laughs. Okay, so in case you're behind, you guys need to be reading the packet from Friedrich Engels. Okay, it says on there, on the reading schedule, it says something about conditions of the working class in England, right? So that's kind of the second half of the reading packet, so I misnamed that thing, because what it should say is, I think it's like the Children's Commission or something like that on the front page, right? So you guys need to read that packet by tomorrow. Tomorrow, okay? Because tomorrow we're going to have a little graded discussion kind of thing on it. You might have noticed there's a question sheet to go along with it. Fill it out. Did you guys catch that? Okay, a question sheet went along with Friedrich Engels. Fill it out by tomorrow. Okay?
Is that going to be great?
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Okay. What does Friedrich Engels look like?
Yeah, I'm working on it. Okay. So here's the packet. It says the Children's Employment Commission. Got an X on it. There you go. Yeah. All right. And then the question sheet looks like this. Fill out some ideas on this. You'll have a few minutes to talk about them in groups tomorrow too, and then we will talk about them, and I will collect them for points.
Wait, we already have this?
You should, yes. If you don't, it's over here or it's online.
Yeah, I got it.
All right, very good. Okay, so that brings us to the Industrial Revolution, ladies and gentlemen. So, the Industrial Revolution, this is by far one of the most important developments in human history. Why?
It brought us into the new age.
Yes, it brought us into the new age. Mass production. Look at the clothes you're wearing. Why do you wear those? Oh, excuse me. How did you get those clothes? Mass production in the factory system, indeed. Okay, you look at these binders that you're carrying around. All right, how did you get those?
China.
China, which is industrialized. Indeed. How did you get this beautiful piece of machinery? What? How did you acquire that beautiful piece of machinery? What brought that thing about?
Mass production.
Mass production, indeed. And this beautiful thing as well, mass production. Oh, all of these things. That foam sword, too. All of these things. Mass production. So without industrialization, our lives would be radically different. However, it's kind of a boring thing to talk about, isn't it? Industry? Yeah, you guys ever get real excited about industry? Me neither. Me neither. So honestly, I'm going to try and go through this as quickly as possible. I used to give like a whole week to this topic. Right? Back in the day, a whole week. And I got real tired of it real fast, okay? But the problem is, on the AP exam, they test you on this stuff like crazy. So what I'm doing is I'm going to give you the brief description in the notes, relatively brief, and then you better keep up in your reading, and also make sure you're reading Sherman for Thursday, because that's the stuff that's going to be definitely testable on the AP exams. They test you on this stuff all the time. So, we see the title here is Furnaces of Hell. We see this dramatic change in Europe as they're starting to bring in industrialization at this time. And many people did not view this favorably. Okay? So when I look around the room today and I see iPads and cool stuff that's created, clothes that are created by mass industry, I think industrialization is a good thing. But how did people in the 18th century in England, or 19th century on the continent, view the conditions of the Industrial Revolution?
No bueno.
No bueno. Si, claro que si. All right, so not liking it for a number of reasons. We'll look at why here in a minute. But first, we've got a little video. So here's a little crash course in history for you. Hopefully you enjoy it.
Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course World History, and today we're going to discuss the series of events that made it possible for you to watch Crash Course, and also made this studio possible, and made the warehouse containing the studio possible. A warehouse, by the way, that houses stuff for warehouses. That's right, it's time to talk about the Industrial Revolution. Although it occurred around the same time as the French, American, Latin American, and Haitian revolutions between, say, 1750 and 1850, the Industrial Revolution was really the most revolutionary of the bunch. No way, dude. All those other revolutions resulted in like new borders and flags and stuff. We've studied 15,000 years of history here at Crash Course Me from the past, and borders and flags have changed plenty, and they're going to keep changing. But in all that time, nothing much changed about the way we disposed of waste, or located drinking water, or acquired clothing. Most people lived on or very close to the land that provided their food. Except for a few exceptions, life expectancy never rose above 35 or below 25. Education was a privilege, not a right. In all those millennia, we never developed a weapon that could kill more than a couple dozen people at once, or a way to travel faster than horseback? For 15,000 years, most humans never owned or used a single item made outside of their communities. Simone Bolivar didn't change that, and neither did the American Declaration of Independence. You have electricity? Industrial Revolution. Blueberries in February? Industrial Revolution. You live somewhere other than a farm? Industrial Revolution. You drive a car? Industrial Revolution. You get 12 years of free formal education? Industrial Revolution. Your bed, your antibiotics, your toilet, your contraception, your tap water, your every waking and sleeping second. Industrial Revolution. Here's one simple statistic that sums it up. Before the Industrial Revolution, about 80% of the world's population was engaged in farming to keep itself and the other 20% of people from starving. Today, in the United States, less than 1% of people list their occupation as farming. I mean, we've come so far that we don't even have to farm flowers anymore. Stan, are these real, by the way? Can't tell if they're made out of foam or digital. So what happened? Technology. Here's my definition. The Industrial Revolution was an increase in production brought about by the use of machines and characterized by the use of new energy sources. Although this will soon get more complicated, for our purposes today, industrialization is not capitalism, although as we will see next week, it is connected to modern capitalism. And the Industrial Revolution began around 1750, and it occurred across most of the earth, but it started in Europe, especially Britain. What happened? Well, let's go to the thought bubble. The innovations of the Industrial Revolution were intimately interconnected. Like, look for instance at the British textile industry. The invention of the flying shuttle by John Kay in 1733 dramatically increased the speed of weaving, which in turn created demand for yarn, which led to inventions like the spinning jenny and the water frame. Soon these processes were mechanized using water power until the steam engine came along to make flying shuttles really fly in these huge cotton mills. The most successful steam engine was built by Thomas, they didn't name anything after me, Newcomen, to clear water out of mines, and because water was cleared out of those mines, there was more coal to power more steam engines, which eventually led to the fancying up of the Newcomen steam engine by James I Got a Unit of Power and a university named after me, Watt, whose engine made possible not only railroads and steamboats, but also ever more efficient cotton mills. And for the first time, chemicals other than stale urine, I wish I was kidding, were being used to bleach the cloth that people wore. The first of which was sulfuric acid, which was created in large quantities only thanks to lead-lined chambers, which would have been impossible without lead production rising dramatically right around 1750 in Britain, thanks to lead foundries powered by coal. And all these factors came together to make more yarn that could be spun and bleached faster and cheaper than ever before. So the problem here is that with industrialization being so deeply interconnected, it's really difficult to figure out why it happened in Europe, especially Britain. And that question of why turns out to be one of the most contentious discussions in world history today. For instance, here are some Eurocentric reasons why industrialization might have happened first in Europe. There's the cultural superiority argument that basically holds that Europeans are just better and smarter than other people. Sometimes this is formulated as Europeans possessing superior rationality. By the way, you'll never guess where the people who make this argument tend to come from, unless you guess that they come from Europe. And then others argue that only Europe had the culture of science and invention that made the creation of these revolutionary technologies possible. Another argument is that freer political institutions encouraged innovation, and strong property rights created incentives for inventors. And finally, people often cite Europe's small population, because small populations require labor-saving inventions. Oh, it's time for the open letter? An open letter to the steam engine. But first, let's see what's in the secret compartment today. Oh, it's a TARDIS, truly the apex of British industrialization. Dear steam engine, you know what's crazy? You've never really been improved upon. Like this thing, which facilitates time travel, probably runs on a steam engine. Almost all electricity around the world, whether it's from coal or nuclear power, it's just a steam engine. It's all still just water and heat, and it speaks to how truly revolutionary the Industrial Revolution was, that since then, it's really just been evolution. Best wishes, John Green. Well, Europeans, specifically the British, had two huge advantages. First, coal. When you trace the story of improved transportation or communication or industrial efficiency or better chemical manufacturing, it always comes back to coal. Because the Industrial Revolution was all about using different forms of energy to automate production. And England had large supplies of coal that were near the surface, which meant that it was cheap to mine, so it quickly replaced wood for heating and cooking and stuff. So that encouraged the British to look for more coal. The only problem with coal mining, aside from it being, like deadly and everything, is that the coal mines flooded all the time. I guess coal mining is also little problematic for like the health of the planet. But because there was all this incentive to get more coal out of the ground, steam engines were invented to pump water out of the mines. And because those early steam engines were super inefficient, they needed a cheap and abundant source of fuel in order to work, namely coal, which meant they were much more useful to the British than anyone else. So steam engines used cheap British coal to keep British coal cheap, and cheap British coal created the opportunity for everything from railroads to steel, which, like so much else in the Industrial Revolution, created a positive feedback loop. Because they run on rails, railroads need steel, and because it is rather heavy, steel needs railroads. Secondly, there were wages. Britain, and to a lesser extent the Low Countries, had the highest wages in the world at the beginning of the 18th century. In 1725, wages in London were the equivalent of 11 grams of silver per day. In Amsterdam, they were 9 grams. In Beijing, Venice, and Florence, they were under 4. And in Delhi, they were under 2. It's not totally clear why wages were so high in Britain. Like, one argument is that the Black Death lowered population so much that it tightened labor markets, but that doesn't explain why wages remained low in, like, plague-ravaged Italy. Mainly, high wages combined with cheap fuel costs meant that it was economically efficient for manufacturers to look to machines as a way of lowering their production costs. To quote the historian Robert Allen, wages were high and energy was cheap. These prices led directly to the Industrial Revolution by giving firms strong incentives to invent technologies that substituted capital and coal for labor.
All right. So, what made it possible to have industrialization in Europe? Why Europe? Why not
coal mines?
Coal mines everywhere. Abundant sources of coal just sitting there to be dug. What else?
The steam engine.
The steam engine. All right. Very good. Where were they using the steam engine in the first place?
To get water out of the
Get water out of the mines. Exactly. So they can dig more coal to put more heat into the steam engines, right? So what else? What are some other arguments? The Eurocentric arguments that he was talking about.
Europeans are better than everybody.
All right, Europeans, they all say we're better than everyone else, and therefore that's why we invented the Industrial Revolution. All right, so I skipped over all the other counter-arguments. He went on for several more minutes about how China and India should have industrialized or could have industrialized just as fast as Britain, but didn't. But the biggest reason why Britain decided to industrialize fastest was they needed a quick source of heat, and they needed coal to do it. And they needed steam to get the water out of the mine so that they could get coal, which then helped them to heat up things and start creating things like steel. Right? So, the point being, Britain has got a lead on everyone else. Not necessarily because they're just better than everyone else, but because they've got a lot of good advantages working for them here. So, British advantages leading into the Industrial Revolution. First of all, what kind of market do they have available to them? Okay, because anytime we're talking business, you got to think of what is your market. Okay? We've got mercantilism where until 1776?
America.
Yeah, there you go, the American colonies. All right, so Britain's got American colonies. They've got an Atlantic market that they're able to tap into here. So they've got colonies not only in America, though, but all over the globe at this point. They're starting to spread their reach all over the place. And so they are using mercantilism, which means, for a country like England, an island country that is, other than coal, fairly limited in its resources, where are they able to get all the other resources that they need? From the colonies, from imports. They get them cheaply. Then they create stuff out of them and sell those to a domestic and international market. So the domestic market, it's pretty nice being in England if you're a business person at this time, because it's cheap and easy to move stuff all over your country, right? Because domestic market, we're talking about in your country. So, why is it so cheap and easy to move stuff around England? What do you think? Take a look at England. Right? What do you got all over?
water.
Water, yes, you've got water all over the place. Not only on the high seas over here, but the rivers as well. It's cheaper for the business people to be shipping things by water at this time. And it works out quite well because in England, you're never more than 35 miles away from a water source, okay? Never more than 35 miles away from a major water source, meaning like the River Thames or the North Sea or the Irish Sea, you name it. They're always close to water. Therefore, they can ship things very quickly. They're also going to help facilitate that even more by having a canal building boom in the 1770s. So they'll be the first country to really start doing a lot of canal building where the government is subsidizing canals. And what does that mean? Subsidizing in industry, like canal building. What does it mean to subsidize?
Pay for it.
Pay for it. All right, so the government has got some money and they want to invest a little of that through cheap loans or low interest rates into businesses. And why would they do that? It's good for the country. How's it good for the country and for the government?
Builds the economy.
Builds the economy, and what can the government do with a strong economy? Tax, all right, and then pay for all kinds of fun stuff. And then when we don't have a strong economy, we've got a bad government, an unstable government. They can't get much done. Oh, okay. So another thing that they're going to be doing at this time is a lot of coal and iron mining. And so coal deposits are all over the place in England because they had once had a lot of trees, right? And what happens to those trees after, however many thousands of years, after they die and fall into the ground and start, going down? They decompose and start turning into coal and stuff. So coal and iron deposits are all over the place. So they're going to be able to dig that like crazy. Another thing that's really working for the Brits, and this is very different from any other country most other countries in Europe at this time, is they have no internal tariffs. Now remind me, what is a tariff? A tax on other people's stuff. Now you would think a country like France, before the French Revolution, would not be competing with each other, right? You'd think that Bordeaux would not compete with Champagne from these different regions in France, and yet they did. What they would do is they'd have a tariff. Every time you go into a different area of France, you'd have to pay some tariffs on your trade goods. So does that facilitate a domestic market? No, it doesn't. So in England, they say, hey, no internal tariffs. What we're going to do is just knock those down so we can trade freely all over England and therefore build our domestic market. And another big part of this is agriculture. Remember, which country, or countries, I'll put you to the real test here. Which country was the first to start the agricultural revolution?
Holland.
What was it?
Britain.
Netherlands, all right, and Holland. Okay, so the Netherlands, the Low Countries. Did you say Holland? Who said Holland?
I said Holland.
You said Holland first. All right, so Holland or the Netherlands and the Low Countries, they were the first to do agricultural revolution. But who stole all those ideas really fast? Britain. Who didn't steal those ideas very fast? France and the rest of the continent. They're going to be 100 years behind because they lagged in the agricultural revolution. Therefore, 1650s is when the agricultural revolution will start to take off for the Brits, which means that production will dramatically increase. By the 1770s, they're going to have incredible output for their food supply, especially in such a limited growing environment, which means that you need fewer peasants. They're going to enclose the land. You don't need so many peasants now, and so where can those peasants go now that they have cheaper food and, well, no job as a peasant? Where can they go?
Cities.
The cities, because now they can afford to live in now they can live in a city and pay cheaply for food and still survive, mostly. Okay, we'll see about that when we get to working conditions. All right, so what that means is we have more money to put towards manufactured goods. So this is working out real well for the urban middle class that's developing at this time. Because urban middle class folk, what they're thinking is, hey, the countryside's feeding us, we don't have to pay too much for it, so now I got lots of money to spend on stuff! Like clothing, yes, clothing and canes and cigars and, fun stovepipe hats and all kinds of cool stuff, right? All right, so another thing that's going to help out the industrial leaders of England at this time. So you've got industrial bourgeois fat cats that are starting to develop at this time, and England, as a government, is going to help facilitate that big time and invest in those people because they've got a central banking system. All right, did most of Europe have that kind of system in place? A central bank that helps distribute low-interest loans to people who need a subsidy to get their business off the ground. No, most of Europe did not have that, but who, pray tell, which enlightened despot, by the way, decided to do that? En France.
14, 15.
Napoleon.
Napoleon! Yes! Napoleon was the first to bring in that central banking system and say, yo, let's go ahead and start investing in things. Really what he was thinking is he needs someone to print lots of paper money so that he can have a bigger army and pay for them a little bit better. Right? But still it's better than nothing. So England, however, they had a central bank for way longer before anybody on the continent did, and therefore they've got better credit markets too. Remember, when you're trying to build up a new business, it takes a lot of risk. It takes a lot of personal investment. So if Cece here wants to start some very risky business, like, a very risky business venture, how about that? For instance, building railroads, right? That's a risky endeavor. He doesn't know that it's going to pay off. If he invests all of his life savings and he's the only man doing this, does he have enough capital, first of all? Probably not. And then if he, is not successful, or if there's a problem with the building plans and then he loses all of his money-making potential, what happens to his investment? Gone. So therefore his capital is gone. All right, but because we have a central banking system and stable credit markets at this time, CC is able to say, well, hey, I've got a risky business adventure that's going to be fantastic, but I need some help. Who might help? Anybody? Anybody willing? You're a bourgeois fat cat. You're willing. Okay, you're going to put in some of your savings. Yeah, another bourgeois fat cat. Put in some of your savings as well. So if they're all pooling their company's money together, right, is it as risky? No. And what's that called when you're all kind of participating here to build up this new business? Huh? Enterprise. All right. So you're buying into the enterprise. You're also buying stock in this company. Therefore, there's less risk involved for you, especially once you start making some cash, right? So another thing that we've got is a stable government in England since 1688. Because who gloriously came over in 1688?
Hanoverians.
Not Hanoverians.
William and Mary Lawrence.
William and Mary Lawrence, indeed. Okay, so very good. And then the next year, what are they going to pass that will solidify representative, stable government? Bill of Rights, indeed, in 1689. So the Bill of Rights going to help them out big time. How does France compare? Okay, from 1688 or so until 1789, how are they looking? Pretty bad. Yeah, okay. So you got Louis XIV for a while in there, but he's fighting some expensive wars. And then you're going to have Louis XV and XVI, who both, just honestly sucked. And then you're going to have 1789 through 1815, more instability, reign of terror, awesome Napoleon, but lots of warfare, right? So not going to work out so well. It's really not until 1815 that they have a little bit of stability, and that'll get shaken up in 1830. And 1848. Yeah, good luck, France. All right, so, meanwhile, England, they also have free market, laissez-faire economics. Now, who is the man, myth, and legend that hypothesized laissez-faire? All right, Adam Smith. And what's the book?
Wealth of Nations.
Wealth of Nations, and what's the year? 1776, indeed. All right, so the British, they'd already been toying with the idea of laissez-faire economics before Adam Smith wrote it down. But really, the point is, England had a much more open economic system. By the time it looked like mercantilism was crumbling in the colonies with the colonial revolts that were happening, Adam Smith was like, hey, let's try something different. Let's have laissez-faire. We've, tinkered with it a little bit. Let's go full out with laissez-faire. And then, boom, a revolution in business practices. All right, so that brings us to the putting out system, as it was called at the time. We're also going to call it the cottage industry because typically seniors who are awake have a good time laughing at the term putting out system. But that's what they called it. So the putting out system is about putting out a product, okay? Putting out a product. So this is how we used to have this was early industrialization in a cottage type of system. So before the factory system arose, both in England and on the continent, we had a little thing called the putting out system where basically it worked like this. You had some merchant capitalist, right? So a merchant capitalist, what he does is he's trying to make some money, but he doesn't want to do it all by himself, does he? No, you got to distribute that work a little bit so he can make more money that way. Okay, so the merchant capitalist, what he wants to do is he buys raw materials, buys some goods, and then what he does is he gives them to a worker or a family, for instance. So what he'll do is put out the raw materials, and then he'll give them to a family or a group of workers in a cottage. And so working from home in their free time, families throughout the Middle Ages and then up here until the early proto-industrialization time, they would be working from their cottages. They'd produce something. They would produce stuff, a product of some kind, right? So after they produce the stuff, what do? After they process the raw materials, what do they do then? Sell it back to the merchant capitalist. Exactly. So the merchant capitalist gets the finished product, and then what he does is does it all over again, right? Okay, so you seeing the system here? Merchant capitalist is trying to make some money by having other people make the stuff for him, and then he takes that stuff and sells it to a larger market. So, let's say that you're a family sitting outside of London. You don't actually live in London. You don't work in a factory. You work from home at night when you've got free time, and you make a little extra cash from this merchant capitalist. He comes by, takes that product, sells it in the city, and makes more money. Why is this the beginning of industrialization? What do you think? All right, let's start here. How is it limited? Let's get some of you business thinkers out there. Anybody interested in going into business? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah, all right, for us. So what do you think? You're our bourgeois fat cat today. Tell me, how is this system limited?
Slow production.
Okay, slow production, a little thing we call bottlenecking. Okay, is that a good thing for you as a capitalist if you have a bottleneck process in which you've got demand over here, but production real slim and slow over here? Is that good enough? No. All right, so what you got to do is find a way to make this happen a lot faster. What's the way to make it happen faster and more efficiently?
Get more people.
Get more people, indeed, but you can't house them all in a cottage using their own tools, can you? What should you do? Put them in a factory, indeed. All right, so that brings us to the factory system. So the first factories that we're going to have are going to develop in England because they had a problem. They had a big problem here. The problem was that they were in constant need of thread, constant shortage of thread. So there's a big demand for thread, because people like to have their products. Now think about this. Before the Industrial Revolution, if you were a worker, you might be lucky to have 2, maybe 3 linen shirts, right? You might have 2 or 3 outfits. How many of you can go to your closet today and say that you've got 2 or 3 outfits? Okay, Riley? All right. Otherwise, the rest of you, that explains the stench that comes from this side of the room. I'm just kidding. Okay, now I gotcha. All right, so, yes. So, all of you obviously have more than 2 or 3 outfits, right? Okay, again, because of industry. Now, that was not the case before industrialization. So, once they start to put out more and more linen shirts, and pretty soon cotton shirts, and by the way, who's feeding them cotton?
America.
We are, that's right, America! Post-1791 especially. All right, so, because 1791 would be at? Cotton spinning.
The cotton gin.
Cotton gin, thank you. All right, yes. And who invented it? There's
Eli Whitney.
he was okay. Yeah! Woo! All right, so the cotton gin's going to start feeding them raw materials, and so they're going to be like, hey, we need to find a way to process these faster, so we need an improved spinning jenny. Now, thankfully for Britain, they had already developed this stuff in the 1720s and 30s, which meant that they had a lead on even people like America, who were going to be feeding them the raw materials later in the 18th century. So they were starting to develop this thing based in linen and then soon cotton. So James Hargreaves, what he's going to do is come up with the cotton spinning jenny. So they used to have a hand loom, and you can see it here. There once was they once used a hand loom where you'd have a dude, a skilled worker, who was standing there, and he was moving the shuttle. That thing that he's got with his left hand is called the shuttle. And then on the right, he'd be cranking this thing to pump the raw materials into the shuttle. So he'd be doing this all day. Okay? I mean, I'd have a hard time with that. I don't think I'm coordinated enough to do it. But so, I mean, not an easy task. And plus, what else is the problem with it? Tiring. It gets jammed easily. What else? Think business. Come on, business people. What do you think? Slow. Exactly. It's too slow. You've got one man who gets tired and hungry and crotchety and doesn't have enough caffeine, and he's doing this all day. Boring. He hates his life. He hates his job. Let's find a way to make it a little more efficient. So Richard Arkwright will invent the water frame. And so what's the innovation here? What's it going to do?
To make it faster.
Yes, because what's powering it?
Steam.
All right, so
Water.
right now it's water. So what they'll have is they will have to be next to a river, right? And they've got plenty of those in England. So you're going to be next to a river, and then you're going to have one of those wheels on the outside of a mini factory that's going to be turning. And as that thing is turning, it's going to be powering this frame. Now they'd already come up with this concept in the late Middle Ages to use water to turn a grindstone, a millstone, and so they came up with that in England. And what does that millstone do for you?
Crushes the flour.
Crushes things, and so it crushes grain so you can make flour. Exactly. So they were like, well, hey, let's just take that and apply it to this spinning jenny. And so that's what they did, and it started to work brilliantly. So what are the results? What about cotton goods? Once we start getting American cotton and we've got British innovation with the machines, what's the result for cotton goods? It's cheap. All right, so I once had 1 or 2, maybe 3 if I'm wealthy, linen shirts. Anybody have linen shirts? No? Okay, not comfortable. They itch. Not as bad as wool, but they're not very comfortable. And they get dirty and disgusting very quickly. All right, so now what we can do, though, is buy lots of cotton goods. And it's cheap! So therefore we can afford them much more easily and therefore buy more. And plus, English wages at this time, how do they compare to the rest of the world? Way higher. All right, 11 grams per silver per day on average. So pretty dang good. So that means we've got more money. Now, weavers, meanwhile, they are going to become the best paid workers in England and some of the best paid workers in the world for this time period. And so they're starting to make a lot more dough and spend more money on the domestic market, which then fuels the Industrial Revolution even more. Another thing they're going to do is move away from agricultural labor. So England is going to be one of the first countries where we see this rapid movement of the peasantry and the formerly landed classes like the peasants moving away from the land and moving into the cities, moving into working in looms and things like that. So what does that mean for labor then? If we have way more people flooding into the cities and we have a more mechanized process, what does that mean for labor costs? They decrease dramatically because even if someone gets their hand stuck in the water frame and loses that hand, you fire him, and then who's waiting outside? Another dude. Yeah. All right. You got to pay that guy much? No, you really don't. All right. And then you got kids too. You start bringing in the babies. All right, because babies got very small hands. So if someone gets stuck in our new steam-powered frame, I mean, really, we just send them one of the kids. They can get it, can't they? Yeah, usually they make it out okay, sometimes, occasionally. We work them hard, but that's okay. It builds character, doesn't it? Builds character. Okay, so we have poor conditions, very poor working conditions. We went through some of this last year, but tell me, what are the conditions like here? No matter if you're a kid or a woman or a man working in the factory system. What are they like?
Miserable.
Miserable, indeed. Okay, why?
Everything's dirty, dim lighting.
Dirty, dim lighting, can't see as you're putting your hand into the machine to grab things, right? Terrible hours, terrible conditions, right? Okay, so here's some kids that are working in the mines because initially what they did is they used kids to work in the mines. Why use kids?
Small holes.
All right, they're small, exactly. They can fit in the tunnels very easily.
Teachers, pardon the interruption. This announcement is for seniors parked in dolls. For you guys second semester, this is the first time you're going to have to move your cars because there's a funeral today. And
Write this down. I'm going to conclude right here.
So either after
So,
this class
they
period
also
or during
apprentice
break would be a great time.
foundlings.
Thank you
And
very
what were
much.
foundlings? Anyone?
Oh,
They
is
were
that where you
orphans.
drop off the kids?
Yes, at a foundling hospital or an
Didn't
orphanage.
Russia do that?
Yeah, they would go and take orphans and say, hey, you're working in the factory this week, and if you die, well, no big deal, no one will miss you. Eee. All right, another thing they did was they worked them 13 to 14 hours per day, 6 days a week, whether you were a grown man, a saucy little woman, or a 10-year-old kid. Doesn't matter. You're going to be working. You're probably going to die in the process. Right? Yay, industry! But hey, I've got cotton clothes and a MacBook Pro now, so it's okay.